Good evening, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for tonight's CRO career conversation focused on CRAs, CRCs, and other careers in clinical research. If you don't know what those acronyms mean right now, you will by the end of tonight, so have no fear. My name is Laura Raleigh, and I serve as Vice President of Life Science Economic Development at the North Carolina Biotechnology Center, and I co-lead our North Carolina CRO collaborative along with my colleague Vivian Doling. While North Carolina is proudly often considered to be the birthplace of the CRO industry and remains the leader in clinical research, we have found that career opportunities in this industry remain a mystery to many. And this event series was then established in 2021 with the aim of providing a platform for clinical research professionals to share their own experiences and to provide you with a forum to ask whatever questions you may have about their own individual career pathways or about clinical research careers more generally. A few housekeeping notes as we're getting started. If you are not already there by default, we do recommend that you use Zoom's gallery view throughout tonight to allow you to see all of our speakers and their reactions. While you as attendees are muted to avoid potential disruptions, we do encourage you to submit questions using the Q&A function, and you'll also see that there is an option to upvote questions that others have submitted. So if you see a question that you really are curious about, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. We'll be devoting the last 30 minutes of our session to answer your questions, and we'll be prioritizing those that have the most likes. Without further delay, I'll next be turning it over to our moderator, Jared Kerr, to introduce himself and kick off tonight's conversation. Jared?
Great, thank you, Laura. So good evening, everyone. Really excited to have quite a diverse group of panelists, and thanks for NC Biotech for putting this on. I'm Jared Kerr. I'm the Graduate Program Coordinator and Clinical Associate Professor at UNC Wilmington. I'm part of the clinical research program that includes a BS and master's and post-baccalaureate certificate program. And it's my pleasure to be the moderator for this going to be a really exciting talk about these career conversations. And I'm sure we have a mix of attendees from people that are interested in clinical research all the way to people that have been in it for a while and maybe are just interested in learning more about the different opportunities I have for either clinical research coordinators, clinical research associates, or anybody working in clinical operations. So first, let me just tell you a little bit about some key terms. What is clinical research? And maybe some basic information you need to know if you're new to it. So in general, clinical research is the process of evaluating through clinical studies or clinical trials new therapies such as medications, biological agents, or like vaccines, devices, but it also could be therapeutic approaches, maybe a new behavioral intervention or a technique, surgery, to evaluate the safety and efficacy of that therapy in people prior to being approved to be in the general population. So it's a process of using the scientific method and research to evaluate whether these therapies can be used in a safe and efficacious way with everybody else. And we do it through experimentation. Next slide. This process takes a long time and it's really expensive. This slide here is from the Pharmaceutical Research Manufacturers Association and shows that all the way on the left side from basic research, where you're hoping to maybe find some potential candidate in the lab, maybe from a natural product, or a new novel protein or something, or even a vaccine for a coronavirus. Taking all those and taking it through a multi-step process of phase 1, 2, and 3 for clinical trials, where you're actually providing that therapy to humans, and then to hope to get FDA approval. It can take at least 10 years on average, and it might on average cost $2.6 billion to get it done. And the likelihood that to be successful is pretty low. Even at phase 1, those candidates that have gotten that far to FDA approval is less than 12% based on current estimates. So, but it's necessary because if you think about all the different illnesses, wellness issues, diseases that we have in the world, just in humans alone, that ways to improve our quality of life and health and well-being, it's really important. So, and it takes a lot of people like the people on this panel to put this together. This slide doesn't even illustrate how many thousands of people are working to bring one medicine to the market. So next slide. And it can be a lot of different products. Might be something that comes from a natural product like a plant or marine biology or the ocean, like at UNC Wilmington, all the way to medicines like these kind of, I don't know, they're orange tablets, probably something like a aspirin or something in the middle, maybe a vaccine like for COVID, or in the left, bottom left. Something as simple, if you never thought about it, like a Band-Aid. Band-Aids are actually a medical device that has to be FDA approved. You might not have thought about that, but that's the case, and they were studied. Or even something like a new product or therapeutic approach, maybe doing something in neuroscience with the brain in the top right image, looking at different imaging to see if they can better diagnose Alzheimer's. And that's just scratching the surface. We look at these products and one of how they're acting, whether they're a chemical or they're biological, something that came from a living organism or device, but also we think of it in terms of the body systems. We have this kind of human body in the middle, looking at how can we have an intervention, whether is it going to be respiratory and thinking of the body systems, cardio or cardiovascular is like the heart and the circulatory system, or neurological, such as the brain, but even something like the skin, dermatology, gastrointestinal, such as the GI tract, metabolic, often we think of diabetes or endocrine diseases, or something not necessarily a body system, but a disease state, such as oncology or cancer. And this is, again, just scratching the surface. There's a diversity of different ways to think about the therapeutic areas, but that also lays a lot of opportunity. And often it's not just one area, they overlap. And a lot of the very novel and innovative medicines out there now can help with a lot of different diseases that hit different types of diseases, illnesses, or body systems. Next slide. But a lot of this is really kind of challenging, a hard time, and the clinical research industry is really good about making a lot of acronyms and abbreviations. So we just rattle them off, and we probably will do it tonight, even though I asked the panelists to try to define what they say. But here's some basic things. And if you need to go look it up while we're talking, use the FDA acronym and abbreviation database and search for it. There's a lot of them out there, but this is one I linked out to. Adverse events at the top, the Code of Federal Regulations. Everyone loves regulations. That's what I teach. And so the CFR is important. Sometimes we'll just say FDA, and we're actually talking most of the time about the US FDA as opposed to other regulatory authorities around the globe. And as Laura mentioned at the beginning, contract research organizations, CROs. They're sometimes called clinical research organizations, but around this kind of discussion we're having tonight, we're probably going to be talking about contract research organizations. And so on, all the way down to institutional review boards, looking at the ethics and human subject participation, randomized clinical trials, which is mostly what we've been talking about in the beginning, and some other terms. So take a look at these. You don't have to memorize them. We're not going to quiz you on it. But if you ever have any trouble, ask or look it up. I think that's the end slide. Yes. Okay. So with that, I think we're going to go to introducing the panelists, and I would like the panelists to start off by just briefly introducing themselves, their title, what title and the job that they do, where they work, what organization, and where they work as far as the location. So we'll start off with Melissa, if you would.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Melissa Long. I work for Advanced Clinical, which is a CRO, clinical research organization. And I'm actually a full service provider, which is a FSP, we call FSP, for a sponsor. But I'm actually home-based right now.
Great. That's a really important thing to bring up as well. We'll probably talk about more. Shelley, you want to go next?
Yes, I am a clinical research coordinator at Duke University Medical Center, and I specifically work in the cardiothoracic surgery department. including heart and lung transplants.
Great, thanks. And Jasmine?
Hi, my name is Jasmine, and I currently work at Syneos Health as a clinical research associate too. I'm also home-based, but I live in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Awesome. So we have 3 different types of roles, and we have also people that are at CROs and at an academic medical center. So this is great. And so I'd like to start off with, I think for the audience, it'd be really interesting to know your background in terms of like formal education, what degrees you have, where you went to school, but also other aspects of that informed your background to get you where you are today. So I'll start off now backwards. I'll go with Jasmine for that one, and then we'll go backwards the other way.
I have my bachelor's in psychology. I obtained that from the illustrious North Carolina A&T. I actually did not plan on being in clinical research like at all. I used to work in behavioral health as well. One day I just decided medical school wasn't going to be my pathway, and then I looked into other career options that would allow me to be fulfilled as well. I didn't realize how many different pathways clinical research offers, whether it's traveling or non-traveling, but that's kind of the pathway I started. It just started with a lot of research and just diving into it to figure out what can I really do and be successful in.
Great, great. And you're not alone in that career path. So Shelley?
I went to school in South Carolina, and I have a degree in secondary education and an emphasis in biological sciences and math. And I taught high school for over 20 years. And I loved it. But after 20 years of children in the home and children at school, I decided it was time for me to graduate. I knew nothing about clinical research, but I'd had a major sinus surgery at Duke, and I was in a clinical trial, and I said, Eureka, I could do this. And so I went to Durham Tech, and I got the associate's degree in clinical research.
Great. I know the program well. Awesome. Glad you joined us. And Melissa?
Thank you. Yes, I started out at UNC. I worked at UNC for 7 years in admin. Then I went to Duke. I worked there in the biomedical engineering department. But I mostly did like grants and contracts and financial. I never thought I'd be in clinical research, but my passion came when my mom passed of colon cancer. So that's where I began to get interested in clinical research. And I'm currently working on my associate's degree at Durham Tech Community College.
Great, awesome. So we have a few Durham Tech people here. This is great. So you've kind of addressed it a little bit, but if you want to add more, how did you discover clinical research, and what was your first job? I know where you are now, but what was your first job that kind of got you into it and you said, well, I want to keep on doing this? Melissa, you want to start off with that, since you kind of started off talking a little bit about your mother?
Okay. I actually, in biomedical engineering, I decided then that I want to get into clinical research. So I actually applied to DCRU, which is the Duke Clinical Research Unit. I applied as a regulatory coordinator. Now, mind you, I didn't even have a degree in clinical research, but because of the classes that I had taken at Durham Tech, the hiring supervisor, she said that I would be a good fit because of the class that I had taken at Durham Tech. So that got my foot in the door, and I've just been going up ever since then.
That's a key component, is once you get in, you can keep on moving through all so many different opportunities, but you have to kind of get your foot in the door and then keep on walking. So Shelley, what about you? You mentioned a little bit, I mean, there's a pretty big career change from going from teaching to working at Duke. So
I love everything biology. And so I knew at some point after I finished teaching, I wanted to do something that in the realm of the medical world. And like I said, after my surgery and I was in a clinical trial, I knew that bingo, this would be perfect for me. And so I did go back to school my last 2 years of teaching, and that was very helpful. Clinical research is not easy. There's lots to know, and it's not just the science, it's laws and regulations and how to do things, it's protocols. And so Durham Tech's degree was very, very helpful to me.
Great.
I actually got my job, my boss here at Duke had called Durham Tech to ask if they had any students that would be interested in a clinical research coordinator in the cardiothoracics. And I just answered an email. Of course, I'd sent out scads of emails for jobs or applied for many jobs, but this one was very, very interesting to me. So I was very thankful.
That's a good point. A lot of times we sometimes think of clinical research as being different from other businesses, but it's like any other business that sometimes you have to send out emails after emails, interviews after interviews, and you don't always, unfortunately, hear back. I've been there. I think probably all of us have been there where you thought it was great and maybe didn't hear back, or sometimes it's on the other side. The employer never hears back from the interviewee. And so there's some aspects of that, but if you're persistent like you were and you have some networking connections that you can develop through events like this, I think it can really help you get to the right fit. And if you don't like the first job, you always can find something else, I think. I know, because I've done it. Jasmine, what about you?
I've actually known about clinical research majority of my life. My neighbor had a clinical research like consulting business. And I've known like a little bit about it, but not enough to say, I want to have a career in it. After my dream of being like a psychiatrist, I wouldn't say it failed, it pivoted rather. My mom was like, well, you should look into clinical research. It has a lot to offer. Just look into it and see, if you find something you like. I did a lot of research because being in behavioral health, it is nothing like clinical research, nothing like working on the floor, nothing. So I did a lot of research. I ended up connecting with someone that was seasoned. I also took a clinical research associate course. For your FYI, it was not that expensive because there are some expensive ones out. And that really just gave me my foundation in clinical research. I think it's very important to have a really good foundation so you're able to speak the language with employers and just with colleagues as well. I was applying while I was taking that class, and eventually I landed my first role as a clinical trial associate. Again, I did a lot of networking, like even on Facebook, I was networking, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, you name it, I was up there. And actually on Facebook is where I met the recruiter that recruited me for the clinical trial assistant role.
That's great. That's good endorsement for. I always think of LinkedIn, but that's great. There's some pretty big networks for clinical research. CRAs is one of the ones I'm most familiar with on Facebook, so that's great. And did any of y'all have like any relatives or immediate family members that were in clinical research that kind of maybe mentioned or like, wow, my uncle's really cool. He does pharma sales, which no? Okay,
No.
It's not surprising. I'm just curious. What was the application and interview process that you've had to go through for these jobs? You mentioned networking. I think that's an important part, but y'all, I assume, probably had different experiences, but it's important to talk about maybe, did you do it remotely for your last job? Did you do it in person? And how did you prepare for that? And does anybody want to go first, or I'll pick on someone? All right, we'll go with, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, did you want to? Oh, okay. Yeah. Yes, I've been with Advanced Clinical for a year, but it was, the interview was virtual because of COVID. Yeah. So, but I did prepare for it because I worked for a CRO prior to coming to Advanced Clinical. I worked for a CRO and let me see, 2 CROs. I worked for 2 CROs before I came to Advanced Clinical, and now I work for a sponsor. So, and like I said, you have to talk the language, so I prepared myself for the different acronyms and everything. For the
And how did you do that?
I just
kind of get the language down.
I just reviewed and tried to go back to experiences that I had with my previous CROs and the language that I talked in. So it helped a lot. Yeah.
that's a good point, because there's kind of an overall glossary or, language we have, jargon, but each company often has their own kind of, I mean, UNCW has something, and Duke has acronyms, but also different companies have, and sometimes you have to get used to that. And we're not always good about define abbreviate, and you are doing great about explaining what you talk about. But Shelley, what about you? How did you prepare for interviewing at Duke?
I'm going to insert that after I finished my associate's degree at Durham Tech, I had an internship at Syneos. And Syneos was very good to me. I enjoyed my internship. It was in study startup, but it did show me that it just I didn't have my hands in medicine, in the medical world. And so I did interview for several positions, but I was fairly confident at that point that a CRC is the way I wanted to go. So I was very thankful for the internship. And like I said, my boss contacted Durham Tech, and so I applied. I had two interviews, one with just my boss and his superior, but then I had one with the whole team. And like Melissa said, I also went back and just looked at terminology used in the CRC world, because I had been in the steady startup world for a good semester. And so I just went back and looked at different words, terminologies, thoughts and ideas, concepts that would be specific to the CRC world.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's and I'm going to follow up on the different roles, but Jasmine, what about yourself? How did you prepare for your current role?
Pretty much the same thing Shelley and Melissa said. Just refreshing on acronyms. I also just reviewed the job description in comparison to my current experience to make sure I really fit the criteria and I was able to explain myself very well. I originally spoke with a recruiter, which is like the pre-screening. If they feel like, you're a good fit, they'll pass you along to the hiring manager. And then I interviewed with a director and a line manager. It took a few weeks to hear back, but that for the most part was my process. It was all remote. When I was interviewing for the clinical trial assistant role, the application was remote, but the actual interview was in person. But again, that was pre-COVID.
And did you use your network to kind of get in that, or did you just apply to Syneos to get in the position? Or
I used my network in applying. I actually got rejected from the role several times, and then one day a recruiter just picked me up and we took off from there.
Yeah, great. That we could have a whole nother panel discussion about the algorithms and the automatic systems for resume reviews.
Oh.
Yeah.
One wrong word and they toss you.
It is tough.
Within 5 seconds of you pushing the confirm, you're done with your resume online, you get an email that says, "Sorry, Charlie, we're looking at other people." I realized very quickly that there was something on that last form that would just kick you off.
Yep.
And that seems unfortunate, but that's the way it is.
Yeah, that is, unfortunately, it's been that way for now, but 10 years or something, it's challenging. So you definitely need to know the right words to put in your resume. And I think that's a good tip for anybody that's thinking about any industry, but especially ours, is you have to have the right kind of terminology and get some people to look at your resume and your application materials. Did y'all find that you needed certain y'all have different education backgrounds? Some of you are still in school. Did you get questions about like, oh, we need someone that has life sciences training or biology, or did you, was it, I know, was there questions about that, or was it pretty open as far as, anybody from a liberal arts degree to a physics degree could apply? Do you have any thoughts about that? And Shelley, maybe we start with you since you taught high school. And
it's interesting at Duke specifically, they don't state that you need a 4-year degree. They don't act like it's any big deal to get in as a CRC. But once you get in, you realize that you almost always have to have a 4-year degree. And because I specifically work in a highly specific field of cardiothoracic surgery, they definitely wanted someone with a biology background or natural science background, even zoology, but they definitely wanted someone with a natural science background. And working in the field, I certainly understand why. Every time I take on a new study, I have to study more about that topic, just to, the body is so complicated, and some of these devices are so extraordinarily complex that it does take a lot of study.
That's a really good point. I'm gonna make a note to follow up on that. Jasmine, what about you? Did you find any challenges going from your BA in psychology to more on the life sciences side?
I didn't really find like too many challenges. I did realize like that was more of a priority for some companies, but I just sold myself in the interview. I mean, me having a bachelor's in psychology shouldn't eliminate me from this role when I have all of the entire skill set. So, I mean, I think it matters, but also we shouldn't, count out other people that have an excellent skill set that would transfer well in that role.
That's a really good point, that transferable skills, if you can emphasize them on the resume, that in the interview can really help bridge that gap, if there is one. So what about you, Melissa? You're in a program now, and so.
Yes, I agree with Jasmine. I don't think, well, thankfully with my interview process, they basically were looking at experience. They didn't even ask about the degree, or they just wanted someone who had the experience, which I had years of, and the different systems that they use in the CRO world. That was very helpful. I had also added those to my resume as well, the different systems that I used and had experience with.
What do you mean by different systems? That I know what you mean, but maybe if you could help us. Oh,
okay. Like I'm in the regulatory part. They're like different portals that some sites and sponsors may use. I can name a few, like CTMS or Florence, the portal that they use for regulatory documents. They basically looked at all of that and go to where you store the documents, and they really like emphasize that I have experience with such and such, so that really helped me out a lot. It wasn't all about the degree, it was my experience. And I really didn't have like 20 years of experience. It wasn't a lot, but just having that little bit of knowledge of what they were talking about, that really helped me a lot.
That's a good point. So you're talking about these computerized systems, that technology that's out there that tracks the documents. This is a highly regulated, one of the most regulated industries. Like it's clinical research, and then oddly mining and oil is also very regulated. So we're right up there, and there's a lot, everything, as you're in regulatory, you got to document everything.
Right.
If it's not documented, does it matter? Didn't happen.
Right. It has to tell a story. Yeah. The study has to tell a story.
So there's these systems in place that are helping us to manage this huge volume of information. Right. And you've become a specialist with dealing with some of these, the Florence e-regulatory system, and you mentioned CTMS, which I think is the clinical trial management system.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. As long as you, like you said, you speak that language, they want to hear that.
What about medical terminology? Shelley, you talked a little bit about that it's not just about knowing the kind of terms of art or the jargon, but sometimes you, especially in cardiothoracic, because you have devices and you have pharmaceuticals, you had to know something about the medical terminology. Was that was that a challenge to kind of keep abreast with the advances?
Because of my biology background, most of the certainly the anatomy of the human body, those terms I already knew. I did take a medical terminology class with my associate's degree at Durham, but from there, it was a lot of just going onto the internet. All of these pharmaceuticals and sponsors have their products online where and most of them are YouTubes, you can watch them, they talk about them. And so I just did a lot of studying so that I knew how they worked. And certainly I don't answer medical questions to my potential participants, but I do need to know how the device works or why we're doing this strategy trial. And so, yeah, it took a lot of studying.
Does anybody else have any comments on that? Was that a challenge or is it easy? Did you have to study?
I would say it's a challenge because I don't have that background. I have to look up everything, like everything, and I have no shame in it. I'd rather look it up and get it right than say something and it means the completely wrong thing.
Yeah. I still carry around my copy of Dorland's Medical Dictionary, and I've had it for around 20 something years. So, and I still, yeah, carry with me to every office and still looking it up. The half-life of science, I've heard from conferences, is about 18 months. It's so rapidly developing, especially in the oncology field, that cancer, that it's amazing what we gain, but to keep up with it's challenging. And so it's, if you like to learn and you like to keep abreast, this is a great industry because you're always presented with new information. At least that's what I find. Do y'all agree, disagree?
I agree.
Great.
I agree. Also, if you're going to be like in the same therapeutic area, majority of your career, a lot of those terms will become very familiar, so you won't necessarily have to look them up every time.
True. Good point. Yeah, you do get used to it. And so do you think that there's positions, entry-level positions for people that want to get into clinical research, or is it that do you find that they have to have 2 years of experience, or they have to have a degree, they have to do something? Are there barriers to entry, or is there something for entry level? Anybody want to, Melissa?
Well, in my case, I didn't really have any. I was just so thankful and blessed to be able to get into clinical research, with the hiring supervisor hiring me with no experience, just a few classes that I took at Derm Tech, So she really opened the door for me, and I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for her. So I don't think you really have to have, it's good to have, but in my case, I didn't have all of that education, so, and I'm still learning, and I really come a long way. I really have for yeah. So I'm thankful.
Any other?
But I don't think so.
I would say that when I was interviewing, almost everybody wanted a minimum of 2 years of experience. And how you get experience if no one wants you before you have experience, that is a mystery. But I have to say, now that I've been in my position, which is considered entry level, clinical research coordinator, now that I've been in it and I look back, I can understand why they want experience. I told my mentor at work that after about 6 months of being in my new position, I felt like I had a new college degree worth of just new knowledge in my brain. It is massive amounts of knowledge that you just have to learn on the go. And so I do understand why everybody wants 2 years of experience. But again, I didn't have it, but the reason I did get picked up was because of my degree at Derm Tech in clinical research.
And Jasmine, you do serve as a CRA.
Yes.
Which is the role that typically is infamous for being tagged as the 2 years of experience role, because pharma, the sponsors, the companies that make the drugs, have said to contract research organizations, we don't want any but a CRA on a study if they don't have 2 years experience. I can speak from experience to say that many times their own in-house don't always have that experience, but when they do the outsourcing, which is what a CRO does, it's kind of an outsourcing for the pharmaceutical companies, they have that 2 year of experience. So your role as a CRA. What did you find with that 2 years of experience?
I didn't have 2 years of experience when I became a CRA. I actually had about a year and a half as a clinical trial assistant. I applied to like the entry-level CRA1 roles, but you have to read the job description because sometimes they do say at least 2 years.
Right.
So I didn't have all the experience, but a lot of companies have training programs now, which are designed to train new CRAs, people that sometimes don't have any clinical research experience or like less than 2 years. So that was my way in of becoming a CRA. Without that, I mean, I probably would have waited another year, which is fine. I do think having prior experience makes the transition much easier, especially as a CRA or even as a coordinator. It just helps because you don't know what you don't know, and really till you don't know it. You won't know that until you don't know it. So
right.
it's one of those things like you want to know the language, you want to know something about it. So when you're, speaking to your sites and learning new things, it's not all brand new. You're just becoming like more of an expert at it.
And a few of y'all mentioned internships. Is that, I mean, there's internships, there's apprenticeships. You don't see them too much within clinical research, but was that a valuable experience to kind of have that internship? And was it paid or unpaid? Can anybody address that?
Mine was, were you about to speak, Shelley?
No, go ahead.
Okay. My internship was unpaid. I actually shadowed a clinical research coordinator. She had been a CRA previously as well. I thought it was a great experience. I mean, I didn't realize how much CRCs do. Yes, Shelley, y'all do a lot. So learning about like really the process of how, patients are recruited, learning different documents, it was really, really helpful. And it made my transition into becoming a clinical trial assistant much smoother. I was able to speak the language in my interview because I did it. I wrote documents, I filled them in. I was there when she consented a patient. Like being able to have those experiences really matter, especially when interviewing and just in your day-to-day role.
Shelley or Melissa, Shelley, did you have a comment about that? Did you intern?
Yes, I did. And it was part of my field work with my my associate's degree at Dermatech. And again, even though it confirmed to me that that's not the way I wanted to go, a CRO, it was very valuable because I learned different computer systems and using different portals and calling doctor's offices and just dealing with medical people. I learned a lot of terminology. It was unpaid, but it gave me experience and it was something I could put on my resume. I think it was very important on my resume.
Great. No, I can, I mean, I'm a big fan of internships since we have internships in our program. And I think it's a wonderful experience. And I've been an intern and I've had students that are interns. And so I'm glad. Melissa, did you do that at all? Or is that?
No, I haven't done the field work yet, but as Shelley said, it would be unpaid, but working a full-time job, that being unpaid to work, that was not a possibility for me. I'm pretty sure a lot of people are not able to just do field work and not do an internship and not get paid for it. So I actually spoke to the professor about that. Is there an option for people who are already in the field? Is there something that we can do to where we don't have to do that internship, So if you're already in the field, is there another option for that? But it would have been unpaid, but that wasn't a possibility for me.
Oh, okay.
Financially,
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And even when I have grad students that have that same problem. And sometimes we have paid internships and unpaid, but yeah, it's a challenge to take the time off when you're maybe juggling your own job, school, family, to then try to get that experience. So it's something to think about maybe more and follow up with about is how to expand that experience. But I'm going to switch a little bit to not just kind of the overview, but a lot of times people want to know what's the day in the life. We've even had some webinars about day in the life of a role. Well, what's your average day as far as the studies that you support? Do you work on just one study? You work on multiple studies? And who do you interact with? I mean, are you interacting just with your kind of same peers just like you, or is it MDs and PhDs and nurses? And is it all kind of, what's the format? Is it in person, or are you basically stuck to your computer on email and all day? Let's have, I think I'll have Melissa go first on that one. If that's okay, Melissa.
Yes, that's fine. I work with CRAs and the CRAs like almost on a daily basis. They have to get these sites activated. So basically what I do is I just have to review all the regulatory documents and make sure I have everything from the site. And the CRAs, they would like let me know what documents they need in order for us to like green light. We call it GL, to green light the site. So I work with CRAs, the TMF team who upload the documents to the system. So it's like a lot of Shelley's and
so those CRAs are coming to
the regulatory coordinator.
So those CRAs are coming to check on how the study's progressing. So they're going from site to site.
Right.
When I say site, they're going from like Duke to Chapel Hill to Wake Forest. They're going from all these different, maybe even a doctor's office, checking on are things being documented?
Right, exactly. And they could be remote as well. We have some CRAs that are remote. They don't go on site. So
that's been a change in the past, 5 years. That's been a big change.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you're meeting people in person and still doing a lot of email, phone calls, but also get to meet people in person?
Well, I just do a lot of emails and phone calls. Since I'm totally home based, I don't see anyone in person.
That's a really good point, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a lot of calls and emails, basically emails and Microsoft Teams. There's a lot of chatting. So
a lot of chatting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Jasmine, what about you as far as being a CRA, and how are your kind of day-to-day kind of in contrast to what Melissa was talking about?
For the most part, like if I'm not traveling on site, I'm in front of my computer screen reviewing documents, probably connecting with Melissa as well for those regulatory documents. A lot of my sites have like a regulatory specialist, so I can speak directly with them about documents. As far as like interaction, I interact with everyone at the site, from the PI, which is the principal investigator, to the coordinator, sometimes to the research director, like anybody really. If they're on that delegation log, we're gonna have a conversation. As far as like my study team, I would say I interact sometimes with the other CRAs on the trial. It just depends on like, if they're traveling or if, we have a question. I also interact with the clinical trial managers on a daily. They're normally following up on items, making sure, we have everything we need. If we need any support, they're also there. Again, looking at the TMF, just a lot of really reconciliation to make sure everything is what it's supposed to be. Sometimes, again, those are emails and calls, and then when I'm on site, it's in person. A lot of times it's better to get them in person or on the phone rather than an email.
And how much are you having to travel for your role?
Not as often, since the study I'm on doesn't have any active participants, but typically, most CROs have like the 8 days on site minimum. So if I were in a regular situation, it would be at least 8 days a month. And the actual traveling schedule would depend on the study monitoring plan.
Yeah. Okay. And Shelley, you're kind of at the center as a coordinator, so you're interacting with both of these.
Yes, I would be acting definitely with both of these. I weirdly get up and I run a report at about 6 o'clock in the morning, only because my principal investigator often goes into surgery quite early, and I have to have PI oversight before I can do my day. So I kind of preempt her going into surgery by running my report, looking for patients that would be eligible for my trial, and then I get PI oversight before she goes into surgery. So my workday starts early. It didn't have to, nobody asked me to, but it works best for all of us. So once I see that I have an eligible participant, I get PI oversight, then I can go about the whole consent process. all of that to say, I never really know what my day will look like until each morning when I run that report and look for eligible patients. If I don't have anyone to consent for that day, I always have a good bit of data to input into the EDCs, the electronic data capture system for the different sponsors. And I also make phone calls, follow-up phone calls to my participants that I have consented in months previous. And if all of that is kept up, updated, I also have a registry. It's a heart transplant registry that will never be completely finished. And so I can work on that in any spare moment. So I would say that I'm at my house working remote about 70% of the time, and probably 30% time at Duke. That may change. I'm taking on one more new study and I'll be in the OR, and that will be more time intensive. And so that may change the dynamics. I may be at Duke a little more, but that is, again, that is thrilling to me because that's up my alley.
That sounds very exciting. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
So you're working not just, Shelley, you're working with subjects, people that are in these trials, and also with people like CRAs like Jasmine, regulatory specialists like Melissa, PIs, the MDs, often PhDs that are in charge, responsible for the study at that center or the site.
Yes.
So, but Jasmine and Melissa, you're not working with subjects, right?
No, I don't work with subjects. Just a lot of documents, pushing a lot of paper. Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm juggling like 5 different studies right now. They're all oncology, but I work on multiple studies at once.
It sounds, I mean, y'all have a mix of being remote and traveling and stuff. It sounds pretty fast paced. Do you have a team? Do you have people to rely on, like a support system, or is it just kind of maybe how do anyone want to talk about how that environment works for you? I know it varies between company, but is it a team, or do you feel like you're kind of
we have a team? The cardiothoracic surgery has a team of CRCs. Each of us are given our own studies, but if we take a day off or we get sick, we are trained on other people's studies. And so it certainly wouldn't be as easy for me to drop in and consent someone for my workmate study, but I could do it. So we work as a team. We rarely see each other and interact as a team unless we have team meetings, because I interact more with patients and PIs and attending surgeons and so forth, and monitors.
Yeah. And monitors is another way to say CRAs.
Yes. Several of my studies actually are with the NIH, and it's 100% verification of each data point. It's not risk-based, and it's brutal. But I have learned a lot going through the monitoring visits.
Yeah, I bet. And so, Jasmine, you mentioned you have you talk to other CRAs. Do you have a team, and you have a CTM or clinical trial manager? Is that kind of your team? And
yeah, I have a team. I utilize my clinical trial manager and other CRAs, but I also have a good network like within CNEOs. Like there's other ERGs of various roles, and then there's the Black Women in Clinical Research ERG. So if I need something, I just send a message to somebody. Somebody can answer it. I don't know who yet, but somebody will get back. So I utilize all aspects. Of course, my line manager is really good. The director is really good. Just have to ask questions if you need it. You don't have to be alone.
And what is an ERG?
Employee Resource Group.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I should have.
No, it's okay.
It just.
I was actually kind of asking for myself. What I was like, I think I know this one, but this is stump the professor on now. And Melissa, since you're remote, you're also working a lot with documents.
Yeah.
What's the human interaction for you like?
Yes, like Jasmine said, I work with the clinical trial managers, the CTMs. I work with other regulatory coordinators. And like Shelley said, like if someone's out on vacation, we're like, I had to back up 2 regulatory coordinators because they were out for vacation. So we just have to like, just try to follow up and catch and do what's needed while the other regulatories are out, because it keeps on going. You know, we have to get these sites activated. So it just can't sit there and wait until they get back. So, yeah.
And we thank you for it. One of my sites just activated yesterday. We thank you.
And when they mention regulatory documents, can you maybe kind of explain what that is for the audience? And what, I mean, are you
yes,
just taking a bunch of regulations from the FDA and sharing them with people, or what
well,
is
they're
it?
actually like the PI documents, like the CVs, we have to have the 1572, the PI's medical license. We have to make sure we have to check for debarment and make sure that the PI is legit, you know, and he can actually work on the study. We collect IBs, which is the investigational brochures, protocol signature pages. We have to collect those. And then make sure all the documents, the consent forms that the CRAs go over with the subjects, we have to make sure they are IRB approved. And we have to collect all of those as well, the approval documents, before we can even get green light for the site. All of these documents have to be in place. And they have to look, if there's something wrong with the document, we have to send it back to the site to get it corrected.
So again, a lot of documentation on that end.
Yes.
So,
Mm-hmm.
and so you can't have I can't go to my neighborhood doctor and just say, hey, can you run a clinical trial for me? You have to, or just anyone that kind of is interested, not anyone's that is interested in running a clinical trial can just do it. You have to have a license, an active license, not be,
Right.
as you said, debarred from the FDA, which means the FDA says you can't do this.
Exactly. And there's a list that the FDA has. Yeah. We have to go through a debarment check for each PI.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sub-Is as well. The sub-investigators as well.
So those are the investigators that are working under the principal investigator at one, and this is just at one investigational site.
Exactly.
There is, I'm going to guess, for some clinical trials, many clinical trials, there's investigational sites all over the world.
Right. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So, yeah. Okay. Wow.
I just don't deal with the United States. We have international, UK, it's all over. Yeah. When it's just now getting Japan. So yeah, it's worldwide. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Very busy.
Yeah.
It's a good busy.
That's a really good point, that the work is not just US based. Sometimes you can be working across time zones and countries and different languages, and
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I mean, thinking about that, what do you wish? I'm going to talk about challenges you face in your role and what problems, but I'm going to lead into that by asking, what do you wish you knew, if you could go back and tell your past self something you really wish you knew before you started? What would that be? Just one thing. And Jasmine?
I would say on paper, traveling that much looks great, but in the reality, you do not sleep. I go from time zone to time zone some weeks, and I'm just like, it's midnight and I'm supposed to be at this site at 8 a.m. It could be very draining and tiring. So I definitely would say, like, think about the travel realistically. Does that fit who you are as a person? And nowadays, like with airlines canceling flights, sometimes you're stuck in the airport. Before you even, leave your actual city, you're stuck. So you're on the phone with the travel agency. Well, can I get a flight out here? Oh, and then they say, no flights till tomorrow. So then you have to tell the coordinator, maybe we need to reschedule because I won't be able to make it out there because it's not drivable either.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Wow.
Shelley, what about you? What do you wish you would have known?
I think my beginning was difficult because the CRC position is just unbelievably complex, like everybody's job has complexities. But I think I came in during COVID, so we were remote. And so not only am I trying to learn all these different systems, but I'm trying to learn remote. And I think remote learning is very difficult. I think one of the challenges that I've probably had is regulatory. I have so many things going on, and I guess when I do consents, I have to catch patients at certain times in certain places, and I have to make my phone calls within visit windows. And you can so easily forget a regulatory requirement, say sending an SAE, a serious adverse event email to my regulatory coordinator or something. She kind of sits off in some ethereal world over there. And I just, you know what? I forget the regulatory end of things fairly easily. And so that's just a challenge I need to work on, keeping all my oars in the water. And I'm very organized, except it's easy to forget the regulatory things, sending things to the IRB and the investigational review board. So I'm so caught up with my PI and taking care with things in the EDC and on the CRFs, the case report forms, it's so easy to overlook something.
It is. It is.
And again, if it's not in writing, it never happened. Whew.
Melissa, what about you? What would you like to have told your?
I think coming from, I worked on the site side as well as the CRO and the sponsor. So a challenge for me, as like I was on the site side, is like getting the documents. Now I'm looking on the other side in the CRO world. I see the importance of having that document, that we need that document in order to get this site activated. So it's like I'm putting myself in the shoes of the site because I've been where they are now. So I think the urgency behind
different perspective.
Yes.
Okay, that's a really good.
Yeah.
I think we could all benefit from being a little bit more aware and compassionate towards our peers. It's a little hard sometimes when we're got
swamped
supervisors, project managers, work asking us, "Hey, is it done? Is the study done? How's enrollment? Pick up enrollment." And it's hard to kind of think that there's other people on the other side of that. So with that, knowing about what you wish you would have known, what are your challenges you're facing now? Shelley, you talked a little bit about the regulatory and the documentation. Are those the challenges, or what types of problems at work do you have to solve to kind of, because obviously you just can't say, well, I'm not going to do the informed consent today.
No, I think my head is buried so much in the day-to-day role with consents and data entry in the EDC and so forth, that when an adverse event comes up, keeping track of what has to be reported, what doesn't have to be reported. And, for every protocol, there are events that have to be reported to the IRB versus other events don't have to be reported. And so keeping all the protocols, keeping track of the differences between them, I think that's what becomes a little overwhelming. Just remember, here's an AE. I need to check whether this protocol requires this to be reported, because it's always different per protocol.
Great. And Melissa or Jasmine, do you have any thoughts on challenges?
I would say the same thing, regulatory. A lot of documents can be collected via email, but at the same time, it's much easier just to be on site and just look through their investigational site file. It's just much easier. Also, reconciling documents that, should have been filed, let's say 5 years ago to now, it's just like, are we going to write a note to file? Do you have it somewhere like, behind the drawer? So just reconciling and regulatory is just a tough one, especially if, your site's closed for COVID. A lot of sites haven't had a monitoring visit in like going on 3 years now. So that's just been a tough battle, but you have to learn to pick your battles with sites.
Yeah. And y'all haven't even addressed that the industry changed a lot in the past 2 years.
Right.
It got a lot faster and it didn't shift back down, didn't downshift afterwards. Melissa, what about you? What challenges do you have?
I agree with Jasmine. Since COVID, there's been a lot of challenges with getting the actual documents. There have been a lot of staff changes. And if we send out like a welcome pack to a site, there could be a change in the contact because they'll say the site regulatory coordinator left. So there's a lot of challenge with trying to get to actually get the documents and make sure that the contact is there, because sometimes they leave and we don't even know that they're gone. So that's a challenge, the site turnover. Yeah.
If I may piggyback off of that, also with COVID happening, a lot of the CRCs work remote. So if I need a document and they're remote for the rest of the week, I don't really have a chance of getting that document until Monday. And that's if they remember and if I send another reminder to make sure. So a lot of people work remote now. They're not on site with the binder every day where they could just scan a copy in.
And it's also really hard, I'm sure, to keep up with the email. And we have all these other systems, Teams you got to check, and your ETM, your electronic trial master file, and your clinical trial management system. So you're checking all these different places besides the actual physical document, to try to make sure you have everything and get you have the most recent copy. That's a lot to keep up with, I'm sure.
All 4 of my studies have remote monitoring, so I've never had a monitor come in on site. I think Duke kind of pushes, we don't require it, but they do push that, hey, this is a great way to go. And of course, all of that take legal documents and agreements and Metalink forms, and but that is a very handy way to go, because I don't have to have paper copies for everything. Most things are electronic, and I don't have to download things, redact papers, and then upload them again. The monitor will get access to certain patients for certain days, and the monitor looks in our EMR, electronic medical records at Duke. And so it takes a lot less work for me because I'm not having to constantly download, redact, and upload.
That's a really good point. The
Fabulous
advancement of the electronic medical record has allowed us to identify potential subjects a lot faster. It's very hard to recruit clinical trials, but it's also been enabling us to better share that information with all the different people, the hundreds of thousands of people that are doing that. I wish I had a nice picture to show how all this information comes in besides showing my hands, but it's a lot of different sites going into this one part, eventually just going to a submission to the FDA. I'm going to switch now. This has been great. I'm enjoying this. I could talk for another hour about this, I think, but I'm going to switch to audience questions because we've had 33 questions now. This is really impressive. Audience, I'm taking the ones that have been upvoted. So if you like a question, upvote it, just click on the like, and we'll go up to the top. So I'm going to start with Anonymous asking, Jasmine, as you said, you networked a lot at the beginning of your career. Do you have tips on networking or any specific templates that you use while connecting to people?
I never used like a template. I more so tried to like introduce myself, not asking them, let's say, for a referral, but I'm applying to, the CRA role at Cineos. What has your experience been like? Looking at their LinkedIn profile to see what type of background they had and seeing if that matched with anything I had. Also just commenting on people's posts, liking, making a post. It just gets your name out there. So when you slide in their DM, they're not in shock. Sliding in DMs can be a little bit awkward, I must say. But I mean, they're human. Just ask them, your question. If they respond, they respond. If they don't, we'll try somebody else.
Great. Good point. Did anybody else have comments on that or any advice?
Networking is incredibly important. When I look back at getting my job, to some degree, it was who I guess my professor at Durham Tech knew my current boss at Duke, and I was networked in because of that system. So a lot of times it's who you know.
It is.
Unfortunately.
That's a really good point. Yeah. And I work with a lot of the other your professors, others in other programs, and that Duke and Chapel Hill major medical sites. And it is really important to have that network and stay in touch with. I want to know what the needs are for people that are hiring our students. Melissa, did you have any comments on that, or do you want me to go to the next question?
Yes, I would like to add also that LinkedIn is great. I mean, still to this day, I'm getting offers through LinkedIn. They're asking me if I'm interested, but then I'll say, I already have a position, but you can keep me on file, So LinkedIn has been very good for me.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you don't have a current LinkedIn profile,
Yeah.
please get one. And if you're in one of our programs, you're probably required to do it. I know a few academic programs require it. Okay, we got one. I think you probably know the person asking the question, but this is upvoted by Charlene, a trainer at Durham Tech. Jasmine, you mentioned that you really sold yourself in the interview process by emphasizing your skill set. And this could be open to anybody, not just Jasmine, but what skills do you think are most beneficial for clinical research professionals to have?
I would say, as far as skill sets, like being organized, are you able to communicate with people? Are you able to, I guess, be more successful in systems? Like, are you an easy learner? Are you able to learn this system, not within a day, that's really unreasonable, within some time? Are you a people's person? I mean, if this role is going to be, patient facing, or you're interacting with other people, is that who you are? Are you more of an introvert where you kind of need to be at home behind a desk? So things like that, I would say, skill set wise. Also, just being able to speak well. You're going to interact with a lot of people way higher up, and you cannot let them intimidate you. So just being able to be yourself authentically, being organized, being able to communicate well. I mean, I think those are important skill sets because they come with each of our roles and in every role in this industry.
Great point. Others? Shelley, Melissa?
I would think what she said.
Sorry.
Yeah, me too. I think being organized is key.
It's a must.
Yeah.
And communication, working together is very important. Being diligent, responsible, and getting things done ahead of time if need be, so that if something else comes up later, it's just being diligent.
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah. We often call it being proactive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And is time management important for y'all?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Time is of the essence.
And you're dealing with people that, I mean, I'm guessing that the coordinators that you're working with, or the PI, the investigators, they're not just sitting around waiting for y'all to have questions. I've never met an investigator that hasn't been running around doing a few things.
Most definitely. I send emails, I have calendar reminders, I write in my planner. I ask, the PR coordinator, what day works best for you? Give me the time, I'll make it work. You got to get them while you can. Otherwise, you might not hear back from them for another week or so because they're that busy.
Great. I think there's one that was upvoted. Hold on, I lost my order of these. I have a question. We addressed it at the beginning, but it's been upvoted a lot, so I'm going to kind of ask it again, but we'll try to keep the answers brief on this one. What are the types of jobs that are offered to get your foot in the door, which I don't think we actually addressed? What are the types of jobs? We just said there are jobs. And then most CRA jobs require 2 years experience. So can you talk about what are the types of jobs that are the entry level, foot in the door kind of jobs? And maybe Shelley, you want to hit that one first?
CRC is definitely entry level. But if I wanted to, in CRC, it's a little difficult to step up a level. So, and stay in the CRC. I could become a team leader, definitely. But if you look at the CRC position, they're working with so many different types of people and jobs that it's easy. It would be easy for me in a couple years to go into the CRA position or the regulatory position, or so CRC is a great stepping stone to other positions. But unfortunately, unless you become a team leader as a CRC, CRC is, entry level.
And to clarify, that's actually in the US often that's considered. In Europe and in other countries, the CRC is one of the more senior positions. And so it gets very confusing when we have to do assessments of like skills and competencies, because internationally, that is not always the case. So
Shall I inform my boss?
I think they know.
Okay.
So at least I'm pretty sure people in Duke Office of Clinical Research are aware of this. So Jasmine, do you have a thought about that?
As far as entry-level positions, I would say like a clinical trial assistant or associate, depending on the company. Also something in like regulatory, being a CRC, like there are a plethora of positions that are out there that people do transfer from into the CRA role. I would also like hone in on the current skill set you have. Like if you're in finances per se, you've been in finances, let's say 10 years, it might be easier to transition to the CRO level in finance rather than applying to the CRA level, like, without any previous experience. So I would have, again, applied to the entry-level roles, but also look at your current skill set. There may be something out here that could give you solid experience, and then a year or so later, you can apply for the job you really want.
Really good point. I would often hire people that had minimal experience that were maybe doing budget work or some contract work, working on clinical trial agreements, budgets and stuff, and that maybe had a certain skill set because they were in finance and maybe they had other aspirations somewhere else, but that got them in the door. So, or they knew terminology. Really good point. Melissa, what about you? You're done regulatory and you've done the specialist and the assistant role. So
yeah, I agree with Jasmine. I think a CTA, clinical trial assistant, that would get your foot in the door. Anything like reviewing documents, I think that will actually get your foot in the door. Like the systems uploading documents, it seems like a small task, but it's a big task to have those documents in there. But I think just doc review or uploading documents would be a good entry level to get in.
Great. And I think a lot of times, if you think it changes per company, but often that specialist or assistant role is the entry level. And then when you get to the associate, that's usually more experience. And then it goes up to managers or consultants. And real quick, and I just didn't mean to cover up the question. Jasmine I sent on the chat, but can you tell the name of your clinical research course that you took?
Yes, of course. I can't remember the exact title, but from my understanding, it was just a regular clinical research associate program. But the name of the company that produced the program is Bigger Biopharma Solutions. It's local, in Durham. The CEO founder, Carolyn Stroud, she has extensive experience in clinical research, and she's just amazing. She made sure I had everything I needed, and it's still to this day. And she works at Syneos as well now.
What was the beginning of that? It was biopharma, but what was the first part?
Vigor.
Okay. Great. I will add that to everyone to see. And then there's also a number of y'all are in academic programs like Durham Tech has the associates programs and certificate programs. Okay, let me check on time. I'm almost getting close to the end. What are some of the skills that someone interested in clinical research and regulatory field should have? I think y'all addressed this pretty well about Melissa, was there anything specific about the regulatory field that you felt maybe was a little different in skill set from, say, like a coordinator or a CRA?
I think it's just like reviewing the documents that are required for the, I call green light for the sites to get activated, like the 1572, which is public information. Anyone could go to the FDA website and just look at that document to see what that looks like. Yeah, just basically the documents, basically. Yeah, the PICVs, medical license, that's public information. Anyone can go there and look at what the medical license looks like. Yeah, so.
How do you get experience on these systems that you all talked about when you're, do you have access to those systems going through your internships or your training programs, or is this, how do you get experience using a Florence, the e-regulatory system that Florence is the company, or a metadata, which is the electronic data capture? Can you briefly kind of talk about how you develop those skills and experience for systems? Or is it on the job?
When I had my internship with Syneos, I was able to work on like the electronic, trial master. I don't even remember what it was called. They are all different per company, but it was like an eFlorence. And there were different portals I used that gave me some experience. And you find that once you've learned one system, certainly the other systems are different, but they think a lot alike. Once you've used one EDC, electronic data capture, for a sponsor, the CRFs work about the same. They may visually look a little different, but they look a lot the same. The hardest part for me in my job was learning the intricacies of MyChart or Epic. It's the huge data system with Duke. I mean, that thing is probably as large as the federal government. It's just awesome. I'm still learning where to go to find this or that. And I've been there almost a year and a half. So that by far was my biggest challenge.
What about any comments from Melissa or Jasmine?
I would say,
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just watching like the demos and just really getting the hands-on experience just allowed me to gain the experience. Like I said earlier, you don't know what you don't know. You can read the manual backwards and forwards, but until you're in the situation, you don't know. So just really taking the time to click around, see what works. Do not create a query, please do not. But just click around and see, how the system functions. Like if you backspace, does it lock you out? Like just small things. Yeah. Click around and see, you'll learn a lot over time. And the more you do it, it'll become second nature.
And a lot of these companies have, I know metadata because we use it, but for our classes, but as well, I think other schools do, but they have a lot of training programs and some of them are free, like the videos. You can just kind of get familiar with it from YouTube or that's not practicing it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not recommending that you just go watch a bunch of YouTubes and become a clinical research professional from YouTube, but you can learn a lot by at least getting familiar with the interface and stuff from these videos. And then, as you said, Jasmine, kind of just working in maybe a training system to play around and learn how it functions, right?
Definitely. I did watch a few videos, but for me, I'm just a hands-on person. I need to touch it, see it, breathe it, smell it, all that. I need to feel it.
I understand. I'm right there with you. Melissa, you had a comment, I know, so.
Yeah, the same here with Florence. I actually had to request access to Florence today. Even though I've had experience before working for another CRO, you have to I had to request access today actually. So, and they do provide like the video for you to look at, and then you have to sign a document, disclosure about using the system and all that. But I agree with Jasmine. It's best just to, after I read it, I was just hands-on, So, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Great.
But they do provide the videos for you to look at.
Another question from Charlene, is at Durham Tech, is Shelley, do you have to perform any clinical procedures such as drawing blood?
I
you have
do
to become
not.
a phlebotomist?
We always call for somebody else. So we put orders in, and whether the nurse does it or phlebotomist comes, somebody else does that kind of clinical work.
Great. Another question for Shelley. What other job opportunities are in your future as you work your way up the ladder? Would those jobs be working with patients?
You know, I so enjoy my job and working with patients. It would be difficult for me to take on something that wasn't out working with people. And so for me, the next step up would be team leader, definitely. So within the cardiothoracic surgery department, we have a team leader, but then you've got abdominal surgery and you've got, you know, children's oncology. All of these different departments have team leaders, and that team leader is in charge of 6 to 10 CRCs, and they do a lot with the study startups and so forth. And so, but you have to be very experienced to get there.
Yeah,
So that'll be a few more years for me,
I imagine.
but I very much enjoy my job.
Are there opportunities? Some of you are in school, some of you are out of school, or some of y'all, do you have plans for continuing your education, either on the job or in a formal? Do you even have time to do that? Jasmine's laughing, so I'm going to guess it's a little challenging.
Yeah, it's definitely challenging. Time is really the hardest thing, I would say. Some days, like Shelley said, I start at 6, 7 a.m. Some days my days end 8, 9, 10 o'clock. So I definitely say it's tough, but I do plan on to continue my education. I still do a lot of like certifications. And again, just seeing what works for me. I have to be realistic when I'm signing up for something. Do I have the capacity to really, you know, commit to it? Because if I don't, I may need to look at it another time, and that's okay.
Good. Okay. Good point. Yeah. There's a question. What do you feel about job opportunities in clinical research? This person's seen a lot of recent entry-level openings, have hundreds of applications for one opening. And I know this has been a topic, the job opportunities, the workforce in clinical research has been quite a hot topic lately because of the pandemic, but also because we've seen there's always seems to be a demand for CRAs. And then there's, and then I know sometimes some companies will, CRAs often are moving between companies, but also sometimes people that are really good coordinators can become CRAs, but they there's a lot of flux sometimes between sites and companies too. So do you have any thoughts about the job opportunities for the next few years? Or
I will just say so much was shut down during COVID that they are restarting studies, and a lot of studies that would have started during COVID had to wait until COVID is over. And I would say, at least what I see at Duke is we have a glut of just studies coming in, and we can't hardly keep up with them. And so we have been doing a lot of hiring. Of course, the economy is, you know, a consideration to those who are hiring, but definitely we are doing a lot of hiring.
And I'll make this,
studies are hitting.
Real quick, any other, I want to go to the round of the last question or so, but any thoughts from Jasmine on that one? Or
I would say, like Shelley said, a lot of jobs are hiring. A lot of roles have like 100+ applicants. I'm just here to say, don't let that discourage you. Apply. You're one of one. Apply. You might be the one to get picked. Apply. Don't let it discourage you. And you know, if they reject, just keep it pushing. There are so many roles out here. What isn't open today, another one will be open tomorrow. Like they're opening jobs like crazy right now.
And be persistent.
Very persistent, because I got rejected several times. before
I think I
landed.
heard that from all of y'all, that you send in the email or the application, but then you're following up with the recruiter or the HR department. You're sending your email, connecting LinkedIn. You're hitting multiple ways. Melissa, what about you? Is that
And
your experience?
yes, Jared, I would like to point out also that if you apply for a position, this has happened to me. I applied for a position, I didn't get it, but they recommended me for another position. So
Yeah,
I would not, like Jasmine said, I would not give up. You never know, they may have something else that's a better fit for you, or an opening that they couldn't fill, at that time. You know?
that's a really good point. The last question, and I'm sorry I can't get to all we still have 39 or something open questions right now. I want to end on this one, is that what is the one thing you enjoy most about your job in clinical research? And I'll start with you, Melissa.
I enjoy I'm able to help someone. It seems like regulatory, I always say this, like it's a small piece of the puzzle, but I think we make a huge difference no matter what part we play or what role we play. I'm just happy to be able to help someone. Even though I'm here to help someone. It's good to know that these trials are actually getting out there and people are enrolling in them, and they're going to make a difference.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Shelley, what about you?
I would say I love working with people, whether it's patients becoming participants in trials, or whether it's working with the principal investigator. I make a lot of phone calls, which are to my participants, and I just very much enjoy that, working with people.
Yeah, great point. Jasmine?
I would say the same as Melissa. I really enjoy making an impact and also just getting to know new people. You'll run across people you would never think you would meet. So it just has opened like a lot of doors for me to meet new people and to learn just different things about life and clinical research. Like it's really broad and you'll learn a lot on this journey.
That's really great. Yeah. And it's not for, if you mentioned earlier, if you're introverted, you have to do things, but there's roles for people that are introverted. There's people for roles that if you're extroverted, there's people that are in between. And there's a need for people that can write and do statistics, to do data management and queries, all the way to working at the sites and working with subjects. Or maybe you don't want to be around heart surgery and you you don't like blood. Hey, that's okay. There's a role for you. So I think this is great. Thank you very much. I'll drop it over to Laura, but thank you very much for all the panelists and the audience for just great discussion and questions. Laura?
Absolutely. I hope everyone will join me in a huge virtual round of applause for our amazing panelists, our wonderful moderator, and for all of you for so many phenomenal questions. These events are valuable and helpful because of this type of engagement. So thank you so much to all of you for joining us tonight. For more information about careers in clinical research and North Carolina's CROs, the website listed there, ncbiotech.org/CRO. You'll also shortly after this be able to find a recording of tonight's event in case you want to listen back and check out things some more. And then finally, I encourage you all to mark your calendars for November 16th to join our next CRO career conversation. We hope to see you then. Thank you again to everyone and have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Thank you. May I say one?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.